Alright everyone, we start off today talking about the Impoundment Act, something that a lot of you may not have actually heard of. It hasn't been a thing since the 1970s. That was when, under Nixon, it was actually struck down. Congress asserted its authority completely over budgetary concerns. In the old days, from the time of literally George Washington all the way up through the 70s, it was understood that because of the executive nature of dispensing money and the differential of how much money you need to do the things that Congress has appropriated money for, the chief executive has wide latitude to impound money. So, let's say that Congress budgets $10 million for some project, and it's understood that the project is not going to cost $10 million. The president may impound part of that money and say, look, well, you're going to have a bunch left over anyway, so I'm impounding some of this. If the project moves ahead and is under what Congress has budgeted for, well, you've just saved potentially millions of dollars. It's a cost-saving measure in large part. It allows for greater latitude there. Under the U.S. Constitution, the U.S. House has the right to appropriate money. They're the ones that actually do the budgeting. Congress controls the purse strings. The House controls the purse strings is the basic moniker. Trump is seeking to restore the Impoundment Act, because while Congress has the ability to make that budget at the House level, pass it through, appropriate money, there is nothing in the Constitution that does not give the authority for the president to say this amount is excessive for its purpose, I'm impounding part of this money until such time as it can be shown that the rest of the money is actually necessary for that purpose. Again, that project that was $10 million, maybe you only spend $7 million on. You now have $3 million of savings. It can be used for some other purpose. Maybe there's you need more for some other purpose. It becomes discretionary effectively. It can be used for something else. Or you can save taxpayers money. I can't say that without a straight face. I support this. This is a good move by Trump. It's not one that's really going to move the barometer of polling or anything, because, a lot of people don't know anything about basic civic law or anything like that. Certainly, they can barely balance their own budgets in large part, generally speaking, so they're not thinking about how Congress does, because typically they can't balance a budget either on a much, much larger magnitude scale. It's a good idea, though, and it's something that's precedented. It's not even a new thing. It was the way that we operated up until roughly the mid-70s. I believe it was 1974, actually. Now the president can only get a deferral, so you can temporarily freeze it, and then you ask Congress to please refrain from spending so much money or something. You could also work in reverse. You could say, hey, we need more. It's a good idea. What Trump is aiming it towards, and he says this explicitly, is to starve the warmongers, which indicates what money he's probably going to impound. Does Ukraine ring a bell? Yeah, no. Ending our involvement at the front end of that particular war that's nudging us closer to nuclear midnight might be a good idea, although I do notice that a lot more people now are gung-ho for Uncle Sam to bomb people in third world countries than they were a while ago. It seems that what happened is that Donald Trump, there's several flies trying to fuck on the webcam at the moment. It seems that after 4 years of Donald Trump not bombing a bunch of shit, on the same order at least that former presidents had, Bush, Obama especially, people's war exhaustion wore off, and now they can be led once again down the dark path of, hey, let's give weapons and shit to another country while we've got 1 million homeless people in the United States. Fuck our veterans, we're going to pay the pensions over in Ukraine. It just doesn't really make a lot of sense because Ukraine's not in NATO. You can feel sorry for them. You can look askance to Russian imperialism. You can well wish the Ukrainian people. Certainly I do. But that does not mean that the entire Western world needs to congeal a dipole involvement in a theater that effectively is not particularly of strategic importance to Western interests in the first place. If it's not strategically interesting, and you've got no real guarantee that it doesn't just turn into a forever war anyway. I mean, Ukraine could become like another Afghanistan. The Russians withdraw, and then you have worse problems in the country. Now you've got 10 million pounds of explosives and a bunch of tanks and shit like that. You haven't lend-leased them. They're not to be returned. They've just been given sight unseen to the Ukrainians, along with a boatload of cash, propping up a regime that is dysfunctional anyway. That's part number one, starve the warmongers, although I suspect it goes beyond Ukraine. On the nose, that's probably the biggest thing that would be impounded. So if you want to stop war again, 4 more years, sounds like a good idea. Trump 2024. He did it before successfully. Even the DeSantis fans won't claim that he was wrong on foreign policy to the extent that they do he was wrong on domestic policy. Even they give him credit. Second part is to save a boatload of cash. So command federal agencies, look into the budgets, find corners that can be cut, find the savings, we impound the money. Quite clearly, third parties would have to be the ones going through it with a fine-tooth comb, because do you think that like the FBI wants to lower its budget, make do with less? Of course not. I have a feeling it would go after the FBI as well, not without good reason. I have a feeling the DOJ might end up not being able to buy $1,000 toilet seat covers and stuff like that anymore. It wouldn't affect, by the way, and Trump is wise to point this out, it would not affect Medicare or Medicaid or Social Security. So it wouldn't have anything to do with those programs. It's interesting right now because I keep hearing that Trump is massively evil and extreme and so forth, and yet he's actually towing a fairly 80s old school like 1983 Republican line more than anything else. Which, yeah, you could definitely do a lot worse than that. Baby steps, baby steps. And as other people are taking up much more of either a warm-hawking neocon line or a moralistic line at the moment. Impoundment would be a valuable strategy in reducing the size and the bloat of federal government excess. It's not perfect. It won't stop at all. It will require quite a bit of effort. But if it pans out, if you can shave 5%, just 5% of that spending off, and I'm sure that they could find more than that, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of, well, it won't go to tax savings, but at least you could use it for something that's more pressing. You could put it into a discretionary pot. You could have some money for a rainy day for the next major disaster or something. You'd be able to fund it right away. You'd have the money already there. You wouldn't have to worry about ramming it through an increasingly politicized, dysfunctional Congress. The idea has legal merit, precedent. There's no reason not to do it. Whether Trump would have the votes as of 24 to immediately do this, I caution you. If Trump is elected and proceeds with his plans, he will likely be dealing with a Democratic House. The Republican Uniparty has shown a widespread willingness to sabotage its own populistic candidates, and because of the increased ballot harvesting / grassroots get-out-the-vote efforts in the GOP, Trump is the first Republican to actively engage in this. Bannon's people, Pressler and his group, and many others are running interference as well. What will happen is the Uniparty will attempt to rob its own non-Uniparty candidates. This will also affect, by the way, certain leftists. You will see that happen as well as the Uniparty attempts to maintain power. So don't expect Trump to do this in the first 2 years. There will almost certainly be a Democratic House. However, the Senate map is looking much more favorable for Big Don. The problem is, of course, that it is the House that controls the budget most directly, and so don't expect impoundment to take hold, at least for the first 2 years, unless there is a protracted litigation, a battle in the courts. Trump coming out and saying, look, there's a wide-reaching civic precedent for this. We'll dovetail it with Bruin, saying that, you know, the other things that have to do with the budget, they're not secondary under constitutional powers to the Second Amendment, a la Bruin. There's co-equality of the various rights and privileges of government groups as well as of human beings in general, and therefore I'm allowed to do it because, you know, we did it until 1974. So that's a recent law without any prior civic precedent whatsoever. He could make such a case. Whether or not a federal court would be amenable to that and you wouldn't have to bring it very slowly before SCOTUS is another story, which of course means that 2-year window, hell, it might even take a little bit longer. Probably don't even bother waging the fucking court case. Just wait until you get a better incarnation of the House of Representatives a la 2026. That's about all. Peace out.